which means it's the art of service, live streaming on LinkedIn and Facebook and wherever else in the world. And this week, I am super excited and actually quite happy to be able to sit down with Simon David Thompson, because that's how he recognizes himself on LinkedIn, probably because there are multiple Simon Thompsons on LinkedIn, but this is Simon David Thompson. And Simon and I go, way back, probably 4 or 5 years now, where I met Simon when I was coaching his accountability group for the Accelerator program, but we'll definitely talk about that. So Simon, welcome and thank you for joining me.
Thanks very much for having me, Ivanka. I'm really looking forward to this. It should be a great chat.
I'm counting on it. I'm counting. I have so
hope
many.
I can live up to it.
No, you should be fine. You should be fine. Hey, let me just turn off my notifications first because we get beeps, which I don't like. The internet. That's where I looked you up. Your description on LinkedIn is quite full on. Like, you have done a lot. And it's all good stuff. So your description, how you introduce yourself on LinkedIn is, you said that you are a commercial contracts strategist. And I know from history, like when people say, oh, you're in procurement, you go like, no. I am a contracts strategist. You're a speaker, you're an international speaker. You're a data scientist founder and previously a rocket scientist. And I went like, that's cool. I remember that and I forgot about it. And then I went like, that's true. You have a bachelor in space engineering, correct?
Yeah, it's mechanical and space engineering, but yes. So
yes.
Similar to a mechanical engineering, but sort of focused on space.
Yeah. So how does a rocket scientist turn into a procurement and contract strategist? Tell me more.
Wow.
How did that happen?
So we've only got an hour. I guess the very short version of it was that when I was going through university and wanted to do, I wasn't quite sure what I wanted to do, but my mum always found me unpicking, taking apart mowers and taking apart pretty much anything. I wasn't so good at putting them back together. I always had the leftover screws and bolts, and still works, but probably didn't work for too much longer. And so really always loved finding out how things worked. And so I went off to university. I went, okay, we'll do engineering. I wasn't quite sure what I wanted to do. Started off in basic engineering, you just do all different types. I was never good at chemistry. So that was ruled that one out. But really gravitated to mechanical, and then they sort of back then, it was 25 years ago, I think, something like that now, was that everyone was talking about, space, this would be really fun, and we're talking about putting a space station up in North Queensland, or this would be great. So I sort of gravitated towards that, and I think at that same time, it was the first year that they could, when you're studying, you could actually do both a business degree as well. So I did the first sort of business and engineering degree combined. It was for those who've done an engineering degree, it's a fair workload, and then to add business on top of that. So within sort of 4 years, did it over 5 years. So I always had a passion of understanding not how things work from a mechanical perspective as well, but also how things work in a business side of things. And I always had a passion for really exploring things. And so I was very privileged and lucky to travel a lot when I was younger with my parents, and I always wanted to continue that. So through my university days, I wanted to go do some industrial experience, practical experience overseas. I rode away to many different places around the world and finally got into a place in Sweden. Everyone would have heard of Volvo. Probably what everyone didn't know was Volvo actually makes a lot of aerospace components as well. So all your commercial airlines you fly on all the day, some of the parts go into the jet engine actually made by Volvo over in a little town in Sweden. So I did some work experience over there.
Can I just interject you there? Because you got me a little bit worried about this story, because you worked at the space department of Volvo. But as a child, you were very good at taking things apart, not so good at putting things together because you had leftover bits.
Yes.
Should I be worried about all the spacecraft that have Volvo elements in them?
No, definitely not at all. So the good thing about engineering is you do a lot of that sort of stuff before it actually goes into things, and so you only put the things that once have been perfected. So a lot of testing and things happen when you pull it apart, run it in the simulated area, and then sort of once it's all working, then you put it back. And so that real philosophy of testing things outside of the working environment, so that people don't fall out of the sky. Volvo also did rocket engines, so European Space Agency, all the satellites and stuff for them were powered by Volvo rocket engines, and also some military missiles and things like that. But that principle of taking things in and testing them, perfecting them in a sort of a quarantine environment, then sort of putting it in is a philosophy that I've sort of taken from back in the engineering days now into sort of business. So the shorter version now of that story, how I ended up in sort of doing contracts and procurement, was that I worked in the engineering space, but after a while it wasn't quite for me. Things didn't happen very fast. So in aerospace, things take about 10 years. So and I wanted something to innovate a lot faster than that. So I came back to Australia, finished off my engineering degree, then actually worked for a software company for a year or so to really go, okay, cool, how do we increase that that innovation, and we could really do a lot of interesting things. So I did that for a little bit, then sort of bounced around for a couple of other different jobs, some into some supply chain, and then sort of into consulting. And then one of my first jobs was consulting and renegotiating I think it was about $100 million aircraft leasing arrangement. And from there it was like, oh, we can actually take those engineering principles and apply it very well into a procurement perspective. So it's really reverse engineering what people need and finding the mismatch or that waste between what they actually need and what's actually being purchased. And that waste is actually, you can, by working together with the supplier or actually with the market, actually reduce a whole lot of costs and actually improve the overall outcome. And been doing that ever since now for about, must be about 15 years.
Yeah. Wow. That's a great journey. And like, you already touched on the fact that your engineering background, you've taken those learnings into procurement consultancy and to really identify the components of what makes a good service or what makes a good product. And so you know what the components are that need to be managed and maintained. So if you take that learning into a risk management mindset, because the reason why I'm asking that is, like, I still have this rocket ship in the back of my head. Like, there must be so much testing going on, and the risk profile of an organization like that must be so tight. Like, it's like there's no room for error. You currently do a lot of work in healthcare, mining. I assume that there's a similar focus on compliance and risk management and risk mitigation. How do you feel about that in relation to what you've learned from your engineering background?
Yeah, I think it's a really strong parallel, because as you said, in aerospace, it's risk mitigation, and you need to make sure that things work, and it's about in aerospace, it's about what's the lifespan and the known lifespan. So things will always deteriorate over time. That's the fundamental principle of everything work. Things will always break. So how do we know for sure when it's going to break, so that we can make sure that it's not going to break? And also in space, they talk a lot about redundancy. If you send someone to the moon, then your risk mitigation is having multiple systems that effectively redundant.
You don't want to have a single point of failure.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. So so therefore we do a lot of work in the mining space at the moment. So if you're setting up a contract with a supplier, so you're outsourcing a lot of your mining operations to someone else, you want to make sure that's actually going to work.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of cases where they'll put in an arrangement and think, for all intents and purposes and all the goodwill that it's going to work. But these are long-term relationships, so it's going to be at least 5+ years. But as we know, things always deteriorate. And over time, much like things mechanical, these relationships will deteriorate over time as well. So it's actually, what we take is that same philosophy from the from the aerospace of going, well, how do we quarantine it into an area where the cost of failure is very minimal, but we can also simulate things instead of looking at things over a huge point in time. In the aerospace, what we do is go, well, we'll take, you can simulate something that is going to take 20 years. And probably everyone remembers, the most simplest example is if you go to an IKEA, and look at, they've got those little devices where they're pushing the chair back and forward with a little piston. And what they're just replicating is, when are these things going to break?
Yeah.
And so they do that in the aerospace, but you can also do that from a commercial perspective as well. Look at these models and simulate when are they going to deteriorate and break, and how are they going to break? So then you can identify, well, how can we fix them? So that's how they manage that risk, so that you don't, from a commercial perspective, in like a couple of years, end up in court with your suppliers because things aren't working.
Yeah,
so
brings me back to my old software testing days of doing stress testing and volume testing and all that sort of stuff.
Yeah, how do you
workload testing?
Yeah, and software is a great way because you can do that in such a massive scale and lots of different scenarios and lots of different ways. So for those turbine engines that go into aircraft, you'd actually run simulations at Volvo of different sort of flight paths, or flights things, and they'd also do some military jet ones which had would put different stress and strains on those components. So you can run those different simulations similar to in the commercial world as well.
Yeah. So in your professional career, I mean, you started at Volvo Aerospace, and then you worked for a large mining company or a resource company. You've negotiated major contracts. You were on a really interesting professional career path. Yet you chose to become an entrepreneur. What made you change? What made you think about, hey, I want to do my own business. I have value to add. What happened?
Interesting. And you sort of think about the word you use then, choice. In some aspects, I think if you ask my mother, she goes, well, you're never going to work for someone for very long. It wasn't a choice. I think it's probably a predisposition to do it. So I think for me, it was seeing an opportunity, being able to run at that opportunity and having that flexibility to do it. And I've always found as well that the fastest way to learn is make mistakes. And it really comes really interesting from a person from working in aerospace that everyone thinks and we're so programmed in business these days to go, don't fail. But if you look at any way of the education process these days, it's the fastest way to learn anything is to actually learn from mistakes, preferably some other people's mistakes, but also learn from your own mistakes. So having the freedom to make those mistakes and it really invest my own money and capital to find if those mistakes are going to work I looked at having my own business as the way to really learn as quickly as I could and accelerate that time. From working in consulting, we had a sort of saying in consulting was that 1 year in consulting was like 5 or 6 years working in business, just because you had so much exposure to so many different things. I think entrepreneurial, being an entrepreneur, it's like 1 year in business, it's like 10 years or something working for another business, because there's so many different components that you're constantly challenged with. And I just love that variety and that challenge there. And then also that ability to work with multiple people and help multiple people at the same time as well was really of interest.
Yeah. So it's really for you to be able to, one, learn a lot, add a lot of value, and to speed up your own experience collection and experience sharing. Is that what I'm hearing?
Yeah, absolutely. And then through that journey, I found as well that we can learn those things. Then there's passing those learnings on to others.
Yeah.
That's probably why that I've got a
Yeah.
consulting business rather than a product-based,
Yeah.
providing a widget or something like that. Was that really love sharing that knowledge that we've acquired through those failures, or through working with or seeing other people's failures in other areas and going, oh, okay, now sort of reverse engineering that and going, here's a whole lot of value that we can provide to people. And it's really that one thing we love is that aha moment. If our client have those and something just, it's that light bulb moment in the head.
Yeah.
That's where we really, that's the thing we look for and love with our clients. They go, oh, okay, I can do this. It's a simpler way of doing this, and it's going to achieve the outcome that I really want. It's going to be easier, shorter time frame, and so forth.
Yeah. So let's talk business and your biggest opportunity for learning. Because you said, rather than saying what was your biggest failure, so what has been your biggest opportunity for learning in your business, and how would you communicate that to other people that are either running their own business or are thinking about starting their own business?
I think the biggest learning that I have is number one, not everyone thinks like an engineer.
Mm-hmm.
So that is and it's from an engineer and from a logical perspective, it is hard to sometimes get out of that and see that people aren't buying from a logical perspective. They're buying from maybe an emotional perspective.
Mm.
And then number two, which sort of relates into that, is that we sell a lot from business to business. What would sell to a owner of a business, where it's their money and their return, is not always what's going to sell to middle management. Middle management has a different, they've got their own set of priorities. So the biggest learning is really doubling down on asking that question with whoever we're serving and whoever providing assistance to them, is really going, well, what's in it for them?
Yeah.
How is this going to help them? So if we save them a whole lot of money, is that actually be beneficial for the organization? Is it actually beneficial for them and their career? Is it going to make them look better and do the work? They've engaged us, so we want to make them sort of the hero.
Yeah. Yeah, that's an interesting one, and it's an important one, because what's good for the business may not necessarily good for the decision maker that you're talking to. So
Yes.
it's so how did you learn to communicate that, and how did you learn to tap into almost an emotional connection? Because as you say, as an engineer, and I'm painting broad brushstrokes here, but as an engineer, the logic in the head, and it's binary and it's ones and zeros. How did you learn to let go of the logic while holding on to the logic to tap into the emotion of the buyer?
I think I just probably took an engineering perspective on it and looked at it from there's a sort of subset of economics called behavioral economics. So what's really driving their behavior? So almost reverse, like we do everything I do, like just reverse engineer it. If you don't understand it, reverse engineer it and try to understand it. So, and what are the components of it, and sort of really strip it back down and sort of then build it back up. So that sort of, it's probably a long way around doing it rather than the short version. But for me, it made sense that then I could go, okay, they're doing this because of this. They have an internal belief. And it's been a lot of books, a lot of listening to people talk, a lot of trial and error with, okay, here's a proposal, is this going to work? And understand why some of them didn't hit the mark while others just really hit the mark. So I think it's probably that's been, I guess the way that I've sort of looked at it.
Yeah. So it's really pulling apart and doing a debrief on every process you went through to figure out, okay, what worked, what didn't work, and then tweak, constantly tweaking, not thinking that the first process or the first communication or the first product will be perfect, but constant retweaking and rebuilding.
Yeah, and a lot of, and it probably comes back to some of the engineering things, is engineering is a lot about continuous improvement. So how do we continuously improve, but also how do we make that cycle as fast as possible?
Yeah.
So that if we don't understand it, put something out there, it may not be perfect, but obviously manage the risk associated with it. So big what's the word for it? I really like the saying, fail fast, fail often, fail cheap.
Yeah.
Because you'll learn a lot that way. So by taking some of those learnings, and it's also not just the learnings that have just recently happened, but reflecting back on things that have happened 10, 20 years ago. Oh, okay, now I understand why that person 10 years ago reacted like this to that in a positive or a negative way, while someone else has acted in a different in another way. And so it's probably then swaying a little bit more back to from a more compassionate side of the human and understanding the human than knowing that just because I think there's a really good saying that I always come back to, and it's culture eats strategy for breakfast. And no matter how good the logic and the strategy is, if you don't get the people side of things right, it's never going to work.
Yeah, absolutely. And finding the right people is such an important skill to have as a business owner. So speaking of that, and we'll come back to the people thing, because I want to do a little bit of a deeper dive in that. But I was thinking about the questions to ask, and having the right people and having the right culture, and go back to your clients, because a lot of your clients have they're large organizations. They have a culture of performance, but maybe not so much a culture of taking risk or accepting failure. How do you identify where you can add the biggest value to your clients? What questions do you ask?
That's a really, really good one. I think their ability to change, if they're and how focused they are on actually meeting some objectives. Because if they're interested in the status quo, then we really won't be able to help them too much. So that's probably the first one. So how invested are they actually making? Are they in actually making a change? Then as well from that is probably and it's probably sort of looking like, for us, it's sort of almost finding the right fit for us with our clients as well. Because some clients will, they might be really invested to make a change, but the way they want to execute that change is not going to be either sustainable, or it's probably going to have some negative consequences to not just the people working within that organization, but also some other people supporting that organization, be it the external suppliers.
Yeah.
So for us, it's sort of, I find it's that alignment of values is really helps. So determine, okay, are they thinking the same? So a lot of our sort of content we're putting out on LinkedIn and so forth these days now isn't so much about marketing, it's about just explaining this is the way that we think about things, and this is the way that we believe things work, and this is where we believe that we how to solve some of these problems, and that'll attract some people who think the same. So therefore, we'll initially, from the get-go, I should say that we go, okay, we're on the same path to actually work and add the most value together. Because if we, another learning from life is that, and maybe it's again the engineering point of view, was that I've always made decisions based on data. Collect as much data as you can, then you go, okay, see what's happening, and then make an informed decision based on that. There's a lot of people out there that that's not the way that they make decisions, nor do they want to. So if they're not interested in that, then we're probably not going to be the right fit for them.
So what is the risk if people are only interested in making non-data driven decisions? What is the risk that you see in the industry that you work with?
I'm pretty biased, but because I think that, if you're not making decisions based on numbers, and doesn't even have to be based on mining or heavy or resources industry, but even just running a business, not having an idea on what the numbers are telling you means that you can make some pretty poor decisions that are really hard to get out of, or really expensive to get out of later on. Just because you go, okay, cool, we'll make this, and I think I've got enough information about it, so therefore we'll make that decision. And that's similar to why aerospace, they spend so much time investing in that, because if you don't understand it properly, then you'll have things that blow up or crack, wings fall off airplanes, which they have done many years ago. We all learn about it in engineering school. So informed decisions based on data, I think it's a really important concept. I've found it served me well. I can only talk about my experience. It served me very well, and in the applications we've done, is you can easily look through some of this data and go, oh, that's where the problem is. One of the most simplest concepts they teach at business school is about Pareto, so the 80-20 rule. So 80% of the work is going to be generated by 20% of the activities, as a simple example. So in our world, dealing with suppliers, if when we did a lot of work in procurement, you run through where's all the spend coming from, and go, well, 80% is coming from just a handful of suppliers. So instead of managing all this work, trying to manage all the low level suppliers, you can manage the spend around some of the big suppliers. So it allows you to quickly get into identify the problem really quickly and solve it, and know that you actually are solving the problem, rather than going, oh, we think I'm doing something right, but not actually know.
Yeah, we just throw stuff against the wall and we'll see what happens.
Yeah.
So
I've tried that too, but then measure which things actually.
Yeah, exactly.
And then understand why.
Yeah, that's the hard part, isn't it? So your love for data has become really, really clear in the last few years, at least to me. You've written a number of love letters to data in the form of your software and your SaaS solutions that you've created in the last few years, which have been so inspirational to watch from the sideline, because it's to me, the way I look at it, it's so clear that you are so driven by value to the customers, about giving insight into data and analyzing and simplifying the data so that they can make executive decisions on it. Now, what strive are people in when they start looking for that kind of solution? What is the risk, the most common risk that you see out there, whether it's a compliance breach or compliance risk, or what kind of risk have people identified before they start talking to you about your data analysis tools?
Sort of the risk that, what's the problem with inside their business, you say?
Yeah.
The biggest risk is for them repeating the same problem. That's by far, as I found, the biggest risk. So for some of our mining clients, it's ending up in court with one of their major contractors again, because things aren't working. So they have the contract isn't working, people aren't making money, they're not hitting production targets and so forth, and so they go, okay, well, and that ends up costing them a huge amount, like tens, sometimes hundreds of millions of dollars. So that's that's that one. We've done some work with some insurance companies, and again, it's well, how do we know what we need to, what levers can we pull? I think that's the risk, is that they're sitting there in front of this. I visualize these bunch of old levers, and they're sitting there going, I'm moving these things and something's happening, 4 steps away or in another room, and I have no idea what's actually happening there. And things have gone bad previously, so overarching, it's, I don't want to make the same mistake there, but I don't want to sort of, I want to know what's actually happening with these levers. So it's, from a very simple example, is imagine riding a bicycle, and I'm sure everyone's probably done it, that when you were younger, you accidentally hit the front brake really too hard and you flipped over the front. From a bike's perspective, it's really easy because you can follow and go, oh, okay, I can see that links to that front brake, so I know that if I hit that one. But in businesses, there's all these levers, such as these brakes and things everywhere, but then it's just opaque about where it goes beyond that, so you can't actually tell. So they're doing these things all the time. I need to break that down, I need to break that down, but then it doesn't, they don't know. So using data, we can actually start to unpick it and understand and sort of trace some of those things down from some types of systems. But then there's another type of sort of philosophy and thinking as well, where there's more complicated systems where it's not so direct, it's more sort of indirect, but then you can still look at, okay, well, what's influencing the behavior through there.
Yeah, so it's really connecting the dots. That's the missing link from.
Well, yeah. Well, summarize. I need to write that one down.
It's recorded. You can always look it up.
Well, I think we have to say as well, it's with the senior executives, the businesses working with, it's really getting them on the same page.
Yeah.
Because they're all sitting there going, we need to improve. We're going to do this. They've got everyone comes to them with these ideas, but they're unfounded. They don't have any data to back it up. They can't make an informed decision. So to get everyone on the same page, you can pull all the data together and go, okay, here's, and actually visualize what's actually happening. And they go, oh, I can now understand. But not just I understand, collectively as a team, we understand. And we can take some of those ideas you had and go, yeah, it's a good idea, but it's not going to achieve the overall impact that we want. So collectively, we can park that one. And so you can whittle it down to the options that are really going to drive the most value.
Yeah. Yeah. And that clarity is so important, and that will save them so much money.
Well, it saves them. A simple example is if you're going to save $10 million and you wait 6 months trying to do it, you've already lost $5 million. So it's not just about making the right decision about doing something to save that $10 million. It's about, the timeliness to actually execute that. And if they're going to spend 12 months, 6-12 months, sometimes even some businesses, like it's 2 or 3 years before they actually make a decision on it, then it's burning a lot of money.
Yeah, exactly. Interesting. I promised I would go back to culture, because you've mentioned culture a couple of times today, and culture to me also not just reflects in your core values, but also in the type of people that you take on board, that you invite to join your journey. So with your engineering background, do you only hire engineers, or what requirements do you have to grow your team? How does that work?
Quite a few of our people are engineers. However, I learned many years ago, and it was some training that when I was working for BHP, they had, where they really pointed out that having diversity inside your team is so critical for making better and informed decisions. A number of engineers, you put a whole lot of engineers together, especially if they're all going back to Myers-Briggs, INTJs, they will make decisions very quickly, because the emotional benefit for them to actually make a decision sometimes outweighs the actual
The actual decision.
The actual decision, exactly. So having a whole lot of people very like-minded to do that is actually counterproductive. You make decisions, but it's a whole lot of horrible decisions. You might get a few good ones in there. So what we try and do, and I set up the business. My co-founder, Greer, she's not an engineer at all. She just comes from private equity, strategy consulting, and I think having that dynamic of going, well, I think about this way, and then having someone else having that diversity to just go, you know what, that's probably not the right way of doing it. And the most frustrated times I have with her is that I sit there and go, you're so right, but I don't want you to be right. But okay, that's not the way I want to go. I really want to do this, but okay, I get what you're saying, and yes, we're going to do that now. So having that diversity in there. So for us and what we look for in our business, I think the one thing that sort of really has risen to the top is what we call like grit. Someone with a bit of grit, someone who can deal with. We sort of think that life throws a whole lot of challenges your way, and it's not just talking about in business, but just general life, and how you actually deal with that will put you in good stead to how you actually can succeed with inside a business environment or with inside a company. So,
and why is that important to you and for your business?
It's important for our business so that we can be agile, and so that we work with clients and we work really closely with clients. And sometimes they might be having a bad day. They might be under a huge amount of stress to deliver something, and they'll push a lot of that stuff onto us. So if we can stay there and be comfortable, go, you know what, this is it's pretty intense and stressful environment. Or negotiating a multi-billion-dollar contract. There's a huge amount of focus in there, but we can put into perspective about, it's quite stressful, but I was once thrown in jail. Well, I was thrown in jail in Russia back 20 years ago. I went, that was a pretty stressful environment, but in comparison to this, it's not that bad, and I'm still going to go home. I'm going to be safe. Like there might be, it might hurt my ego, it might hurt some future careers if I don't get it right, but it's not a life or death situation. So I think, and it just, I found it enables, we found a more rounded sort of people that we generally like working with as well.
Yeah.
Because they're not so, I guess, precious about some things.
So how do you do that? Because you mentioned grit, you mentioned resilience, and you mentioned the ability to put things in perspective. I'm sure there's a beautiful English word for it that I completely forgot about it. But all those things together. So how is that for you? Because running a business or being an entrepreneur, like they say in the US, running a business is not just going from positive to positive to positive experience. You already said, like, as entrepreneurs, we need to learn to fail and learn from our failings. How did you do that? Not the data analysis and the reverse engineering, but it's like, what was your biggest struggle in building this business, and how did you get out of that? Was there a series of bigger struggles? Because
I don't think running a business is never one. It's going from one. I think someone might have said this to me one time. It's like you're just consistently going from one thing to the next and just trying to master that little like become not really a master, but becoming significantly better in one little area. So it might be, dealing with your finances of the business and dealing with accounting, and getting that right, or now we need to hire people. So it's moving on to that. I think the way that I've sort of got over that is just by taking some little bite-sized things that I can just go, yes, I can master that, and then get some improvement. Because if everything's failing, you're never going to have the motivation to to continue. But if you can have some little wins along the way, we go, yeah, okay, we got that. We set that up now. Now we can move on to something else and go, okay, and just create that space to then have time to do other things, and sort of fix things along the way and better things along the way, has been the way that I've found that we've been able to get there. But in terms of the biggest struggle, I think there's heaps of struggles along the way, like everything. Dealing with clients, dealing with employees, dealing with just cash flow, and just everything in between it's not a walk in the park. Definitely not.
And how do you find that space? You said you need to have some space to put things in perspective. You need space, because a lot of people that I talk with that are, and as you know, as an accelerator coach, I used to work a lot with people that were in between that sort of $250,000 to $1 million US kind of businesses. And I find that when people are in that sort of stage, it's a lot of head down, bum up, just work, grind. We need grit, we need grind, just need to keep going. So what changed for you that you were able to sit back and reflect and say, okay, hang on, I just need to make time to look forward, and I need to make time to see what's going on and what's happening?
Oh, well, number one is having a great coach.
Oh, well, thank you.
But again, they're putting in perspective with some other sort of entrepreneurs as well. So I was very lucky through the entrepreneurial organization to meet up frequently with other business owners, and you can get really into the detail, go, well, what's working well, what's not working well, and while you think, oh my God, I'm a massive failure. And I think a lot of entrepreneurs have that imposter syndrome, like, oh, like, I don't think this is working. Like, I'm not there yet, but like, why is this? Why it's either working well or not working well? And then you can actually compare that, or just listen to other entrepreneurs and go, oh, they're doing the same thing. Actually, that's not. It's okay that it's not going perfectly, because I think a lot of the stuff that's out there, we're constantly bombarded, and also when you tell people, when people tell you how things are going, it's always, oh yeah, things are going really well. Like, business is growing, business is booming. Like people want to buy in, from a sales perspective. They don't want to buy into an organization that's not doing well or got some issues. That's a risk to that organization. But so everyone tells you things are all going well. So by the second one is speaking with those other people, but then also taking that time and set aside some time, each week or each month, definitely each month, and just having that time to sort of debrief about the business and go, okay, how are things going? Where's this going? Let's put that in perspective. And how are we going in terms of tracking towards our goals? And I found that just resets everything. It sort of puts some of these things, some of those stresses away, and go, actually, it's not too bad. Or actually, that was really good. We should really celebrate that. Because we've been trying to get there for the last 5 years, and we finally got there. And let's not just let that sit beside. Let's just actually really celebrate that and go, yes, we've actually got there.
Yeah. And that's an enormous learning as well. That is, the fact that you realize that you've made success and you've achieved a goal, and that you take time to celebrate rather than just, oh yeah, next, because we're so focused.
Things are good, but they're not that good. And you go, actually, that's pretty good. It's just, there's always a target that you want to get to. Just a little bit more.
Yeah.
Or something just a little bit more interesting.
Maybe your interest changes over time, where you go, okay, that used to be really interesting 5 years ago, and I thought this would be really interesting, but I've grown in that 5 years, and now that's really interesting. So it's you grow with your goals.
I was very lucky many years ago when I was, because when I was working over in Sweden, I'd travel back. I worked there a couple of times over 3 years, and always flew back and forth, obviously, to Australia, and I'd stop in the UK and had a family friend there that I'd catch up with and have a meal with quite frequently. And so those who have been to the UK, you've probably heard of, well, you've probably eaten at Pret a Manger, Pret, it's always called there. So this guy actually founded it. And so we'd sit down and have coffee or go have a meal somewhere. And I was very lucky that he took a shine to me. And I was explaining one day, I was like, I've done all this stuff, but it seems good, but now it seems like that interest has gone somewhere else. And he explained, he said, Simon, life is like a step ladder. I said, every step you take on it, your horizon changes and you get a different view of things. And that was 25 years ago, 20 something years ago. And that's really stayed with me and going, actually, well, yeah, it is going to change.
Yeah.
As we learn more things, or as we see more things, as we experience more things, my interests are going to change. And my point of view on things are going to change as well. And that's okay.
Yeah. That's a great learning. That's one of those one-liners that every entrepreneur should have on their mirror. Like when they get ready in the morning, it's like with every step you take on the ladder, your horizon will change. So it's and it takes me back to your rocket science days, because when you go up into space, it's an even bigger horizon. Like the sky's the limit, literally. So
Yeah.
So speaking of Sweden, you did mention that you were a local celebrity there and that you actually made it to the newspapers a couple of times. So, but you didn't tell me why. So
I didn't. So when I was over there, I grew up here playing rugby, and I loved playing rugby. And one of the times when I was over there, I saw in the middle of winter, I saw these rugby posts sticking out of a field. And the next time I went over there, it was summer. So I wrote to this club and said, my very bad Swedish, and said, I'm Australian, I love to play. So managed to play a season with there. So a little team called Vänersborg, which is just north on Gothenburg, about an hour and a bit north of there, and played a season there. And the local newspaper ran a few stories because we actually won the whole Swedish championship for that year. So, and it was 30 years since they last won it. So yeah,
it's because of the Australian.
I think it was because there was a couple of Australians and Pacific Islanders and Kiwis and stuff in there. So we were stacked with a lot of talent, which was great. But it was a fantastic way to see the country. We got to travel across because every Saturday we'd get on the team bus, travel sometimes across to Stockholm, which is a 4-hour trip, play a game there, and then travel back on the bus. It's depending how long the bus trip was, it got a bit messy, but it was a bit fun with the beers. So it was a great way to get around, and we'd always have lunch with the team as well that we just played with. So it was a really great way. It was another learning I found as well, that sport really connects a lot of people across different cultures, across different countries, and it's an amazing thing. So I've found out that if ever going to live somewhere else, it's just go straight to the local club of whatever sort of sport you like playing, from darts through to rally car or whatever it is. It doesn't have to be rugby, but it's an amazing sort of way to connect with people.
Yeah, connect with people. So speaking of connecting, how can people connect with you? Because we haven't even mentioned your business name. It's changed a little bit. It's Acquire Insights.
Yes.
That's your consulting business. And then you have the contractmanager.com. That is one of your products. And contractpulse.com is one of your products as well. And then Tracy, is that how I say it?
That's Tracy, yes.
Yeah, Tracy, TRAACI.com. What's the best way to get in touch with you? If people, want to have a chat with a real rocket scientist, or have a chat about, hey, my business needs data engineering, needs data analysis.
Sure. Probably the easiest way is to contact me on LinkedIn. You can search for the reason why there's a David in there. So you're absolutely right. Simon David Thompson. Yep. There's only one of them. So if you search for that on LinkedIn, you'll come across me. So you can either message me directly through there, through our website, acquireinsights.com.au. You'll find our contact details on that website down the bottom, so you can reach out through there as well, and you pretty much you'll come directly through to me.
Fabulous. Well, thank you so much for your time. It's been interesting, and I love how you've connected your history and experience as an engineer to reverse engineer a product and a service for organizations to help them manage their risks and their in contracts and procurement, and just be able to make data-driven decisions. And I love that. So thank you for your service to the world.
Thank you so much, Ivanka. It's
thank you
been
for this time.
fantastic.
Please stay on so we can have a little chat offline, but I'm going to end the stream now. And I'll be back next week, Thursday, with another LinkedIn Live, out of service LinkedIn Live. And it will be about business compliance, risk management, and the power of asking the right questions. So I'll see you all next week, and I'll chat to you later, Simon.